The formula Seth says will create the life you truly want. Say that aloud. Let the sentence sit like a seed. Before we dig in, one clarifying line. When I say Seth, I mean the entity channeled by Jane Roberts, a metaphysical framework that speaks about consciousness, identity, and the creative power of mind. What follows is a translation, a practical step-by-step rendering of Seth's core claim, interpreted through contemporary neuroscience and embodied practice, so you can experiment with it in your life. This is not a proof text, it's an operational map. We'll walk the territory together, metaphor to mechanism, suggestion to rehearsal, always careful about what is metaphysical poetry and what is empirical observation. There's a simple, troubling fact that sits behind every stalled life change. Most of us try to create a new future using the same old self. We rehearse a different outcome while the body insists on its script. The mind imagines, but the body remembers. That mismatch is the invisible force that recreates yesterday's patterns and calls them fate. Imagine you live in a house built by habit. The beams are your stories, the wallpaper is the feeling tone you learned in childhood, the plumbing is the body's automatic reactions. You want to move to a sunlit house across the river, but every time you close your eyes and picture a new doorway, your feet trace the old hallway. The house, the habitual identity, pulls you back. This is what Seth calls the addiction to identity, a tendency to live from the past because the nervous system is wired to repeat familiar feelings and behaviors. The problem is not moral weakness, it's neurobiology plus meaning. Your nervous system has been trained through repetition and emotional investment to defend the past. Stress hormones, autonomic patterns, and the emotional weight of memory conspire to keep you small in the name of safety. That's why change feels like an act of betrayal to your own body. Seth's teaching, channeled by Jane Roberts, makes a radical claim. Creation begins in consciousness. But consciousness isn't a mystical wish. In Seth's map, it's a field of information, the place where image, emotion, and intent combine into a signal. The practical question becomes, how do you turn an inner image into a biological signal that the body recognizes and follows? Here is the formula, translated into 5 operational steps you can practice. 1. Intend the future. Form a clear, embodied image of who you want to be and what life you want. 2. Evoke the elevated emotion. Feel now the emotion that belongs to that future as if it's present. 3. Create coherence. Bring brain and heart into a synchronized, receptive state where new information can anchor. 4. Embody the new identity. Rehearse behaviors, postures, and microactions that align the body with that future self. 5. Repeat until the circuitry rewires. Consistent practice stabilizes the new patterns so the body treats the future as familiar. Those 5 steps are brief labels that hide a lot of nuance. Each step can be translated into a reliable set of actions: breath patterns that shift attention, heart-focused practices that rearrange autonomic tone, mental rehearsals that prime the prefrontal cortex, and walking meditations that teach the body through movement. Later in this series, we'll give you a full 7-day immersion built around these steps. For now, commit this instruction to memory. You must teach the body the future feeling first. That sentence is the hinge on which everything turns. If you want the guided 7-day sequence as a downloadable practice guide, the exact meditations, prompts, and journaling templates, hit subscribe and check the link in the description. I'll put that resource there for anyone who wants to try this as a disciplined experiment. Let's walk these ideas more slowly and map metaphors to mechanisms. When Seth says image and feeling create, think of the brain as an organ that recognizes patterns. The prefrontal cortex imagines and plans, the limbic system evaluates emotional value, the autonomic nervous system encodes safety or threat, the body stores the result as habit. The bridge between a future image and present body change is not an act of magic, it is a predictable set of neurophysiological events that can be influenced by practice. Step 1. Intend the future. Intention is not vague wishing. In this approach, an intention is a vivid scene you can mentally rehearse with sensory detail and specificity. I want to be happy is too thin. I want to wake up each morning with steady energy, to walk into my workspace and feel confident as I speak, is concrete. The brain responds to specificity because mental rehearsal activates many of the same neural circuits as actual experience. In experiments with motor learning, imaging a movement lights up the same motor maps as performing it. The same principle applies to emotional and identity rehearsal. When you repeatedly imagine a future self, you prime the neural pathways that will be used when that future becomes present. Imagine sitting quietly and constructing a moment from your future life, where you are, what you can see, the texture of light, the tone of your voice, the taste or smell in the air, the micro decisions you're making in that scene. Add behavioral details, how you hold your body, the cadence of your speech, your interactions with other people. The more sensory and specific, the clearer the signal you send to the nervous system. This is why vague goal lists fail. Goals that live only in concept do not provide the nervous system with the pattern it needs. Intention must be an embodied image, a scene that your nervous system can rehearse offline. Step 2. Evoke the elevated emotion. Seth insists the feeling must precede circumstance. In his metaphysical idiom, summon the emotion that belongs to your desired reality and live in it now. In neurobiological terms, emotion is the signal amplifier. Elevated emotions, gratitude, joy, peacefulness, confident love, have a different physiological signature than anxiety or shame. They shift hormonal chemistry, modulate heart rate variability, and create a bodily state the brain recognizes as desirable and safe. This is not about forcing positivity or denying pain. Authentic elevated emotion is specific and anchored to the imagined scene. It is not a sugarcoating. It is the felt power of the future. You might recall a memory that produced a similar feeling and use it as a bridge, or you might deliberately evoke the quality you want, a sense of competence, ease, or belonging, and let that quality suffuse your imagined scene. A crucial point: the body will resist novelty. If you evoke a future feeling that is radically different from your habitual affective set point, you will feel tension. This is normal. The body remembers and seeks familiar states. That's why the process must be gradual and persistent. Teach the body the future feeling first, then the rest will follow. Bridge, metaphor to mechanism. When we move from metaphor to mechanism, we say intention creates a pattern. Elevated emotion assigns valence and urgency. Together, they bias neural activity toward a new attractor state. But to shift the attractor, the stable pattern your nervous system returns to, you need coherence. That's step 3. Step 3, create coherence. Coherence is a word that bridges heart and brain. It refers to a state where physiological rhythm, like heart rhythm, and brain activity are coordinated in a way that supports clear perception, emotional regulation, and integrative processing. In practical terms, coherence means the nervous system is neither scattered in high beta anxiety nor collapsed in diffuse low energy lethargy. It is focused, receptive, and aligned. Neuroscience gives us a helpful model. Brain activity moves through recognizable frequency bands. Wakeful, reactive thinking typically shows high beta activity, fast, narrow, and scattered. As attention settles, the brain moves into alpha, a quieter, more integrated rhythm. Deeper creative access corresponds to theta, the twilight state associated with memory consolidation and creative insight. Gamma is a high-frequency band that often accompanies moments of synchronized brain firing and intense coherent focus. These bands are not hierarchical commandments. They are descriptive markers of different modes of attention. The practical aim is to shift from reactive beta into alpha-theta territory while increasing cardiac brain synchrony. Heart-brain coherence research suggests that a calm, steady heart rhythm, often produced by gentle breath work and positive affect, sends predictable signals to the brain that facilitate attention, emotional regulation, and memory reconsolidation. In other words, when heart rhythm and brain rhythms lock into a coherent pattern, the system becomes more amenable to taking on a new habitual set point. A small experiment you can do right now, no stopwatch required. Close your eyes, bring to mind a clear image of the future you intend, and feel a small, authentic lift of positive emotion associated with that scene. Let your breathing become slow and gentle. Notice how the chest softens. Allow your attention to rest in the region of the heart as you imagine the scene. Don't force the feeling, invite it. Notice whether the body says yes or tenses in resistance. Either response is information. This is the heart of the protocol. Intention plus elevated emotion folded into a state of coherence. But there's a deeper technique Seth's teaching recommends, a kind of sensory reduction, an invitation to attend to nothing that helps you reach field access. Contemporary practice often calls this sensory reduction or field sensing.
Mechanistically, it resembles down-regulating the default mode network and reducing sensory clutter, allowing the nervous system to adopt a new pattern. What does attending to nothing feel like? For many people, it's not emptiness as absence, but a spaciousness that allows images and feelings to stand out without being drowned by reactive mental chatter. In that space, a new configuration can take root. Now, let's pause here for a moment of guided rehearsal, a micro practice that encapsulates intention, elevated emotion, and coherence together. This is not a medical intervention. Treat it as an experiment in noticing how your body responds. Find a comfortable seat or stand with your feet on the ground. Bring your hands gently to your lap. Close your eyes if that feels safe. Form a clear, single scene from the future you intend, where you are, who you're with, the texture of the moment. Let the scene be simple and specific. Allow one small, genuine positive feeling to arise that belongs to the scene, a sense of competence, of ease, of quiet joy. Don't manufacture it. Allow it. Now, soften your breathing. Imagine the breath beginning low near the belly and rising gently to the chest. As you inhale, imagine drawing attention up the spine, as if attention were a slow current moving from root to crown. As you exhale, imagine any tension melting away. Keep the heart focused. Feel the area around your sternum open as you continue to hold the scene and the future feeling. If a thought interrupts, name it briefly and let it drift. Bring your attention back to the image and the feeling. Stay with this for a few cycles. Notice any shifts in temperature, subtle changes in muscle tone, or shifts in imagery vividness.
When you are ready, let the image fade and open your eyes. Journal one sentence. Today I felt. This practice is small but meaningful because it begins to teach the body the future feeling first, a deliberate signal that the nervous system can register as possible. A few notes on resistance. The first times you practice this, the body may push back. You might feel anxiety, irritability, or even mild nausea as old chemistry surfaces. This is part of reconsolidation. The nervous system reorganizes, and old defensive patterns can flare. Expect it. The cue to continue is not the absence of discomfort, but the repeated, consistent return to the practice. Over days, those defensive flares usually diminish as new patterns gain traction. Let's unpack why repetition matters. Neural pathways strengthen with repetition, but not all repetition is equal. Repeating old behavior while imagining the new is an inconsistent signal. It confuses the system. Instead, practice must be both mental and embodied. Mental rehearsal with physical alignment can stall because the body retains its own memory. Conversely, shifting posture or micro-actions without changing the inner emotional tone can feel hollow. The trick is to bring image, feeling, and somatic rehearsal together so they form a coherent package the nervous system recognizes as real. This is where the concept of becoming someone else becomes operational. To become someone new, you must coax the nervous system into treating that person's feeling tone as familiar. That requires aligning posture, breath, micro-decisions, inner narrative, and social presence, not all at once, but in coherent increments. Tiny acts recruit muscle memory. Tiny emotional rehearsals change baseline affect. Tiny daily choices compound into a new identity. Mechanistically, what changes beneath the surface? The prefrontal cortex begins to prioritize certain action plans over others. The amygdala and other limbic structures reduce reactive alarm when the system repeatedly experiences the new feeling as safe. Synaptic connections that supported the old pattern weaken through lack of use. New connections strengthen through repeated activation. Neuroplasticity is not instantaneous, but it is real. When sustained practice aligns cognitive image, emotion, and body, the probability of behavior change increases. We should also say something about the role of narrative. Your self-story, the words you use to describe who you are, serves as ongoing rehearsal. If your story anchors you to the past, I've always been anxious, that's just who I am, the body interprets that story as a conditioning instruction. One of the most powerful moves you can make is to craft a present tense story about the future self and speak it into being in small ways. I am learning to speak with calm confidence. I am someone who chooses rest. I am the kind of person who keeps my word to myself.
These are not brittle proclamations. They are practice scaffolds that give the nervous system language to hold while it rewires. At this stage, a natural question arises. How fast does this work? Seth's metaphysical frame suggests that from the field,
Possibilities exist beyond linear time. Modern neuroscience does not endorse magical shortcuts. It offers an understanding of mechanisms that can change at variable rates depending on history, intensity of practice, stress load, and environmental reinforcement. Some people report noticeable shifts after weeks, others require months. What matters is the coherence and consistency of your practice, and the humility to treat this as a personal laboratory rather than a promise of overnight transformation. I want to be clear about boundaries. Nothing here is a substitute for medical care. If you are managing a diagnosed condition, mental or physical, integrate these practices responsibly with professional guidance. These techniques are supportive tools for regulation and transformation, not replacements for medical treatment. Before we move deeper into the practical architecture of the formula, let's return to a fundamental warning Seth's language conveys in a poetic register. If you try to create the future from the same habitual identity, you will reliably get more of the past. That warning is not meant to shame, it's meant to underline the logic of the method. You must become someone else, slowly, patiently, so your physiology will follow your imagination. How does one become someone else in concrete terms? There are 5 domains to change in small rituals: posture and micro-behaviors, inner narrative and self-talk, breath and heart rhythm, patterned attention, where you habitually look or listen, and social microenvironments, the people and contexts that reinforce old patterns. Change one domain and the others often follow. Change all 5 with coherent intention and progress accelerates. Let's explore the breath-heart mechanism in a bit more detail, because it's the practical lever you can use anywhere. Breath affects the autonomic nervous system directly. Slow, steady diaphragmatic breathing stimulates the vagus nerve and shifts the system toward parasympathetic regulation, a calmer state. When breath is combined with a gentle heart focus and positive affect, heart rate variability often increases, in a pattern that correlates with improved emotional regulation and cognitive flexibility. This is the physiological signature of coherence. A steady rhythm coupled with a felt tone of appreciation or contentedness produces a more receptive platform for mental rehearsal to anchor. One more bridging note before we continue. In Seth's own parlance, the field is the place where information pre-exists form. Translate that to practice by imagining the field as a landscape of potential patterns that your nervous system can tune into.
You do not pull a finished thing out of nothing. You tune your organism to resonate with a pattern and then let behavior and circumstance reorganize around that resonance. That is the logic of intention plus emotion plus coherence. We are now in a place where the formula is clear. Intend, feel, cohere, embody, repeat. In the next segment, we will deep dive into the neurophysiological scaffolding that supports each step, including a more precise mapping of brainwave states, what alpha and theta feel like, and how to access them without needing fancy equipment. A small guided practice that teaches the up the spine attentional moves Seth recommends in symbolic language, and how to structure your day-to-day micro-habit loop so that identity change sticks. But before we close this section, 2 practical invitations you can take now. First, tonight, before bed, spend 5 minutes forming one clear scene, feel the emotion that belongs to it, and breathe with gentle heart focus. Write one line in your notebook about what you imagined and what you felt. Second, notice tomorrow a small behavior you can enact that aligns with that scene, a micro-decision that says, in action, I am that person. It might be standing a little taller, making a brief call you've been postponing, or choosing a food that supports your energy. These little acts are the scaffolding of embodiment. Remember, teach the body the future feeling first. Say it again. Let it anchor. The paradox of creation in Seth's teaching and in contemporary practice is that you do not merely think a new life into being. You train a living system through image, emotion, and repeated embodied action until the new pattern becomes the default. That is the work. We're now poised to explore the second pillar of the formula in greater depth, the precise steps that move brain activity from reactive beta into alpha and theta, and the practices that amplify heart-brain coherence so the nervous system can accept a new attractor. That will include a guided micro-ritual, an attentional ascent from root to crown described symbolically as a spinal current, and a set of instructions for a walking embodiment practice you can use to make the identity real in motion. We'll also examine, cautiously, what modern studies suggest about group coherence effects, laboratory experiments with random generators, and heart rate field studies that hint at collective influence, always described as preliminary and interpretive rather than conclusive. Before we shift into those particulars, let me tell you a short representative vignette that clarifies the stakes. She came to the practice because the old script of her life felt like heavy clothing on a long, hot day. For years, her inner narrator had been efficient at predicting small failures. You'll mess up the meeting. You're not the kind of person people rely on. You'll never be able to stop worrying. Those sentences shaped posture, breath, and choices.
In the first weeks of practice, she found it almost impossible to sustain the elevated feeling without a rush of nausea and self-criticism. Her body insisted she was lying to herself, so she began smaller. 2 minutes of mental rehearsal each morning, followed by one micro-action, answering an email she had been avoiding. She did this for 30 days. The small actions created a feedback loop that slowly altered how her prefrontal cortex prioritized tasks and how her body judged safety. After 6 weeks, she reported a subtle but palpable difference. Where she once braced before speaking, she now felt a steady undercurrent of calm. Her story didn't vanish overnight, but it softened. This is not a miracle report. It is a pattern many people notice when practice is consistent. Contrast that with someone else who tried the same protocol as a one-off, then expected immediate external changes, a new job, a new relationship, and when those did not appear within days, abandoned the practice. The missing ingredient in that narrative is repetition, and the willingness to become someone else long enough for the body to accept the novelty. There's an ethical edge here. The promise of dramatic, instant transformation feeds a marketplace of quick fixes. The responsible path is slow, curious, and experimental. Use practice to gather data about yourself. Track subtle shifts in mood, sleep quality, ease of decision-making, and micro-behaviors. Those are the real measures of progress, not instant external rearrangement. We have covered intention, elevated emotion, and an introduction to coherence, plus a micro-rehearsal you can try immediately. We are building a scaffold. Up next, we'll give you precise ways to access alpha-theta states without needing an EEG, describe breath sequences that reliably shift autonomic tone, and narrate a walking meditation that turns imagined scenes into movement memories. We'll also examine the role of group practice and the current cautious findings that suggest collective coherence may measurably influence certain weak signals in experimental settings. Hold that image of the life you truly want. Hold the feeling that belongs to it. Sense how your body responds when you keep that image and feeling present during ordinary moments. These small, repeated experiments are the laboratory where Seth's formula becomes method, and where neuroscience supplies a model for what is happening inside your living system. There is more to unpack. A refined breathing ritual that trains attention to run up the spine like a slow stream, a short walking sequence that encodes the future self into gait and posture, and the surprising dynamics of group resonance. We will go into each next, translating symbolic language into practical, repeatable steps, always with the caution that this work complements. It does not replace medical advice or therapeutic care. As you sit with this, notice one last question. If you could truly become someone else, not by pretending, but by rewiring what your body knows, what would you do differently tomorrow? That question is the doorway. If that question, if you could truly become someone else, not by pretending, but by rewiring what your body knows, is the doorway, then the rest of this work is simply learning how to walk through it without tripping over the furniture of habit. We've already named the method: intend, feel, cohere, embody, repeat. Now I'm going to give you the practical mechanics that make each step usable in day-to-day life. A breathing ritual that reliably moves attention up the spine and quiets reactive thinking. Accessible cues that help you enter alpha and theta without an EEG. A walking practice that encodes future self posture into gait. A 7-day experiment you can follow. And safe, ethical instructions for short group practice that demonstrates what emergence might look like. Along the way, I'll be clear about what is speculative, what is supported by observations, and what is practical invitation rather than promise. Let's begin with a ritual that translates Seth's symbolic attentional ascent, the image of attention flowing up the spine, into a reproducible technique. Think of this as a training exercise. Over time, it becomes a motor habit.
attention can be guided more easily, and the body learns to accept the accompanying feeling as familiar. Find a comfortable seated position. Ground both feet on the floor. Allow the spine to be long but not rigid. Let the shoulders soften. Bring gentle awareness to the base of the spine, the place where your body meets the chair and meets the ground, and imagine attention as a warm current that begins there. On the in-breath, feel the current lift slowly, moving like a mild tide along the back of the body, passing through the lower belly, the diaphragm, the heart, and finally resting lightly at the area between the eyebrows or the crown. On the out-breath, let tension release. The movement is steady and unhurried. It's not a forced pushing so much as a steady invitation. There are practical cues to make this more reliable. First, coordinate the breath with the attention. As you inhale, imagine a slight upward vector of attention. As you exhale, release any grip. Second, soften the jaw and face on the exhale. Facial tension anchors reactive beta. Third, maintain a small, authentic positive affect in the chest while you hold the imagined future scene. This is not theatrical optimism. It's the felt quality of the future you rehearsed. Calm capability, mild contentment, steady confidence. The breath and attention pattern does two things at once. It gives your prefrontal maps a physical route to rehearse the future self, and it downregulates sympathetic arousal so the limbic system can begin to accept new valences. A few practical tips. If your mind rushes, don't fight it with more force.
Name the thought, planning, worry, and return the current to the spine. If the body protests with nausea or dullness, slow the practice and shorten the session. Remember the rule: small, consistent signals win over time. 10 minutes a day practiced for weeks will outperform sporadic, intense sessions followed by abandonment. Now, how do you know when you are moving into alpha or theta without a device? There are phenomenological markers that most people can learn to recognize. Alpha often brings a gentle reduction in inner chatter, a sense of effortless attention, and a widening of peripheral awareness. It feels like being present without strain. Theta is deeper. Images and metaphors arise more readily, time seems to stretch or compress, and the felt sense of meaning intensifies. Some people experience a light headiness or a dreamy clarity in theta. Gamma events, brief peaks of synchronized neural firing associated with moments of insight or ecstatic focus, can feel like sudden vividness, crisp clarity, or flushes of emotional meaning. The important point is not to chase labels, but to notice the internal markers: less reactivity, easier breath, an open heart tone, and the arrival of novel mental images that feel generative rather than rehearsed. One practical routine to stabilize coherence combines heart focus with the up-the-spine attention. Sit with your hands lightly on the belly. Bring your awareness to the center of the chest. Hold the future scene you intend, the same scene you practiced earlier, and allow a small, genuine positive emotion to arise. Breathe slowly and gently, guiding attention up the spine on the in-breath and keeping the chest soft. If you notice the heartbeat becoming steady and the breath easy, you are producing the physiological underpinnings of coherence. Stay here for a few cycles. End by writing one sentence in your journal about any subtle shifts you noticed. Do this each morning and you begin to collect a baseline of data about how your nervous system responds. There is an interpretive layer to this. In Seth's metaphorical vocabulary, the ascent of attention opens you to the field where information pre-exists form. In contemporary translation, the ascent is a method to reduce default mode chatter and let attentional networks settle into patterns more conducive to rehearsed imagery. The metaphor and the mechanism are two ways to describe the same practical lever. Call it spiritual language or neuroscientific language. Either way, the technique produces a useful change in how your organism handles novelty. Now, let's turn to the body element, embodiment through movement. Cameras and lab studies often focus on what happens in the skull, but the body is a memory device. Gait, canny micro-postures, and habitual gestures keep identity alive. To become someone else, you must program the body with new movement memories.
A walking meditation designed for embodiment uses slow, deliberate steps and micro-attention to foot and pelvis. Stand with a soft bend in the knees. Imagine your imagined future scene again, but now translated into movement. How does your future self step into a room? What is the relationship between head and torso? The walking practice is simple. Take a step with mindful attention to the sensations in the sole, the ankle, the calf, and the pelvis. Move slowly at first, noticing the sequence of muscle activation.
Allow the breath to be slow and dialogue-free. With each step, enact one tiny future self micro-action, a softer shoulder, a steady gaze, a slightly longer pause before speaking. These micro-actions are the bricks of embodiment. Practice the walking meditation for as little as 5 minutes a day. Each week, add one new micro-action into your practice. Over time, the gait and stance that express the future self become integrated into your daily movement, and the body grows accustomed to the new posture as normal. That bodily normalcy tells your nervous system this new way of being is safe and predictable. Let's be practical about scheduling and habit design, because the psychology of change is often where grand ideas fail. The most effective programs stitch practice into existing patterns. Anchor your morning intention and coherence ritual to another habit you already have, after making coffee, before you open your laptop, and make the practice short and repeatable, 5 to 15 minutes. Use midday walking meditations as a micro reset, 3 to 7 minutes of mindful steps after lunch. Use evenings for journal reflection, one sentence about how the day honored or betrayed the intended scene, one micro action you took, and one area you will revise tomorrow. I want to give you a clear, day-by-day, 7-day micro-experiment you can try as a disciplined laboratory for this method. Treat it as an exploratory trial. Collect observations, not proofs. The aim is to teach your organism the future feeling first, while building the habit scaffolding that allows embodied identity to follow. You will need a notebook or a digital note app and a commitment to small daily actions. Day 1. Clarify and anchor. Morning. 10 minutes forming one vivid scene. Feel one authentic positive emotion that belongs to it. 2 minutes of the up-the-spine breath attention move. Afternoon. Identify one micro-action that aligns with the scene and execute it. Evening. Journal one sentence. Today I felt. Note mood on a simple 1 to 10 scale and write one micro-behavior you enacted. Day 2. Amplify feeling. Morning. 10 to 12 minutes. Repeat the scene, increase the felt quality slightly, and hold the heart focus longer. Afternoon. Perform 2 micro-actions rather than 1. Evening. Journal sensations, noting any body resistance or ease. Day 3. Coherence practice.
Morning. 15 minutes, up the spine attention combined with heart focus to intentionally create coherence. Stay with the scene and the feeling for longer intervals. Afternoon. A 5-minute walking embodiment micro-practice. Evening. Record sleep quality and any dreams. Assess mood change. Day 4. Embodiment deepening. Morning. 10 minutes intention plus elevated emotion, followed by a 10-minute walking meditation that encodes one future microhabit, voice tone, posture. Afternoon. Test social microenvironment. Say a short present tense line to one person or in the mirror. I am learning to. Evening. Journal relational reactions. What changed externally, what didn't. Day 5. Integration and micro-decision chains. Morning. 20 minutes total, split into 2 10-minute sessions, one seated coherence practice, one walking embodiment. Afternoon. Create a chain of 3 micro-decisions that support the scene. Example, say no to one thing that drains energy, choose one nourishing food, take a 10-minute focused work block. Evening. Evaluate energy and attention across the day. Day 6. Group resonance or social experiment. Morning. Solo practice as on day 3. Afternoon or evening. If you have a trusted friend or group, conduct a short shared coherence practice, 5 minutes of synchronized heart focus and intention, explained below in group protocol. If not, sit and imagine the future self in relation to a circle of supportive people. Evening. Journal about felt resonance and any external shifts. Day 7. Review and ritualize. Morning. A slightly longer practice, 20 minutes. Intention, elevated emotion, coherence. Afternoon. Embody your future self in one tangible social or work setting. Evening. Write a 1-page review. What shifted in felt tone, behavior, sleep, and microhabits. Plan a 4-week follow-up with small weekly goals. Throughout the week, track 3 simple metrics: mood, 1 to 10, energy, 1 to 10, and number of micro-actions completed. Optionally, if you have access to heart rate variability tracking, use it as an exploratory correlate of coherence, but treat the data interpretively.
HRV can vary for many reasons and is not a definitive measure of spiritual progress. The point of metrics is to invite curiosity and avoid binary success-failure thinking. 2 important notes about the 7-day model. First, you will get more from the experiment if you treat it as curiosity-driven rather than destiny-making. Gather data, not judgment. Second, expect resistance. The body will intervene because it learns safety from familiar feelings. That resistance is not a verdict against the method. It is evidence the body is participating. Be compassionate and steady. Now, a short word about social dynamics and ethics. When you start changing posture, narrative, or energy, relationships may respond. Some friends or family will celebrate. Others may feel threatened by the change because it calls their own patterns into relief.
Boundaries are essential. You are training your nervous system. You are not training other people. Use kindness and clarity. Do not weaponize influence or claim authority over others' inner lives. If someone in your life experiences distress as a result of your change, invite conversation and hold steady to ethical care. There is also a communal side to this practice that merits careful attention. Research teams and field investigators have reported preliminary phenomena suggesting that coordinated group intention sometimes correlates with small changes in weak random signals, classic experiments with random number generators, or subtle HRV synchrony studies. These findings are exploratory and controversial. If you are curious, you can run a gentle group practice without grand claims. Gather a small, trusted group, agree on one clear, non-medical intention, e.g., we will cultivate calm presence for our neighborhood, and conduct a 5-minute synchronized coherence practice where everyone holds the same scene and heart tone. Afterward, share subjective reports and collect simple metrics like perceived calm, ease of decision-making, or small behavioral outcomes. Use it as a relational experiment rather than evidence of metaphysical control. The experience of collective coherence often produces a palpable felt sense of being supported, and that in itself is valuable. Let me offer 2 short vignettes that illustrate the range of possible outcomes, always with the sensitivity that these are anecdotal patterns rather than proof. One woman joined a weekly group practice that began with 5 minutes of heart-focused synchronization and a shared future intention about being more present with her teenagers. Over 6 weeks, she reported not only personal calm, but also small behavioral shifts at home. Phone use decreased during dinner, conversations lengthened by a minute or 2, and her relationship with one child thawed in a way that felt real and durable. The group did not claim they had changed destiny, only that their shared practice produced a relational environment where different choices were possible. This is emergence in the ordinary sense. The social field reorganized gradually because multiple nervous systems shifted their habitual responses simultaneously. A second anecdote involves physiological observation. In some preliminary studies and exploratory reports, researchers observed trends in gene expression correlates after certain meditative interventions. In one line of work, changes in expression of certain genes, such as serpina A5, were noted as part of a broader pattern. Those observations are early and interpretive. They suggest that sustained mind-body practice can be associated with shifts in gene expression, but they are not a guarantee of health outcomes and require replication. Respect the curiosity of that research, but do not let it become a claim of cure or medical certainty. Always integrate such practices with appropriate medical advice when health issues are present. Resistance, again, is a key part of the story. The nervous system often responds to novelty with alarm because stability has survival value. You can expect pushback, fatigue, increased anxiety, temporary social friction, or a sense of being less yourself. That's why the method emphasizes repeatability and gradual increments. Teach the body the future feeling first. Repeat that phrase now and let it settle. Teach the body the future feeling first. If you lose your way, return to small daily signals that the body can register. That is the corrective action. A more delicate topic is the role of the pineal and third eye imagery. Seth's language sometimes uses symbolic references to inner light or a center of perception beyond ordinary senses. Contemporary interpreters speculate about pineal involvement, but the science here is preliminary and often speculative. If you find third eye imagery personally useful, treat it as a symbolic focal point. Visualizing the crown or the space between the eyebrows can be a mnemonic for attention and a useful anchor for certain breath practices. Do not take symbolic language as a claim about endogenous pharmacology or biochemical production.
Explain to yourself and to others that this is a ritual lever, not a biomedical intervention. We should pause for another guided micro-practice, this time integrating movement, breath, and vocal posture, so you practice becoming with more channels active. This sequence is designed to be portable. You can do it standing in a hallway, in a park, or in a quiet room. Stand with feet hip-width apart. Soften the knees. Bring your attention to the scene of your future self. Take a slow breath into the belly, feeling the body expand gently. On the exhale, let the shoulders soften and imagine attention moving up the spine. Repeat this a few times until the breath feels steady. Now, with the next exhale, say a short present tense line softly to yourself. Nothing dramatic. Something like, I speak with calm clarity, or I move with steady ease. Keep your voice low and relaxed. Allow the words to be a tiny motor action that coordinates breath, throat, and heart. Take a slow step forward on an inhale and a slight pause on the exhale, keeping the chest open. Repeat this pattern, breath, soft phrase, step, for 5 to 10 cycles. Finish by standing still and feeling any subtle shifts in balance or posture. Journal one sentence about any change. This integration trains the vocal apparatus into the embodied narrative of your future self. Speaking in present tense sentences, even softly, strengthens the prefrontal commitment and creates small public signals that your social environment can register over time. We now come to a practical set of troubleshooting guidelines, because most attempts to change are foiled by familiar, solvable problems. Problem: practice feels like fake it.
Fix: shorten sessions and reduce intensity. Emphasize small, authentic feeling. Even 20 seconds of genuine feeling trumps 10 minutes of forced positivity. Problem: bodies protest with fatigue, headaches, or nausea. Fix: slow the practice. Reduce time and increase grounding actions, standing, drinking water, or walking gently. If symptoms persist, consult a healthcare provider to rule out medical causes. Problem: social relationships become strained. Fix: communicate simply and compassionately about your practices. Invite dialogue about boundaries. Remember that change can look like abandonment to some people. Patience and clarity are essential. Problem: you expect external miracles and feel discouraged. Fix: recalibrate success metrics. Track micro-behaviors, mood, sleep, and 1 or 2 behavioral outcomes like the number of micro-actions executed. Celebrate small, consistent signals. A short word about the spiritual frame and channeling context. When we say this is Seth's formula, remember the qualification. Seth's teachings come through Jane Roberts as channeled material, a metaphysical framework that frames consciousness in poetic and practical terms. The steps we're practicing are a modern translation that map those metaphors onto observable processes in attention, autonomic regulation, and embodied behavior. Adopt whatever language suits your worldview, but keep the practical orientation. Treat this as an experiment with your living system. If you find sacred resonance in Seth's words, that can be an additional motivational layer. If you prefer a purely secular translation, that works too. The method is pluralistic and operational. Another practical domain to consider is the environment that supports becoming. Small environmental tweaks reduce cognitive load and signal the new identity to your senses. Consider your immediate surroundings: light, clutter, what you see when you sit. A clear desk or a single object that represents the future self, a journal, a specific mug, can be an anchor. Add one ritual cue: a consistent playlist, a scarf you wear during practice, a small altar, not for magical effect, but for associative learning. The nervous system learns by association. Consistent cues make the new pattern stick. Let's finish by returning to the social dimension one more time and offering an accessible protocol for group coherence that is ethical, simple, and low risk. Use this only with consenting adults who understand that this is an exploratory practice, not a guarantee. Gather a small group of trusted people. Agree on one clear, non-medical intention, such as, we aim to cultivate calm presence in our community. Everyone sits comfortably. Each person spends 30 seconds forming a clear image of what that calm presence looks like in ordinary life.
Synchronize a 3 to 5 minute heart-focused coherence practice. Bring attention to the heart area, breathe gently, hold the image softly, and allow a small positive feeling to arise. After the practice, spend 5 minutes sharing subjective impressions. Optionally, repeat the practice once a week for 4 weeks and record subjective measures of perceived calm, the number of pro-social actions taken, or small measurable outcomes like attendance at community events. Use the group as a relational support network rather than as a tool to control external events. Finally, closure and integration. The work of becoming someone else is both humble and audacious. It asks for patience because living systems are stubborn, and audacity because you must imagine a future that your present ecology does not yet contain. Teach the body the future feeling first. Repeat it again here so it can land. Teach the body the future feeling first. That phrase is both a technique and a compass. It reminds you to prioritize felt experience over mere conceptual hope. As you move forward, keep the ethics clear. Do not promise cures or guaranteed prosperity to yourself or others. Treat speculative biology as hypothesis and meditational effects as supportive, not substitutive, of professional care. If you combine these practices with therapy or medical treatment, inform your clinicians and integrate respectfully. If you've already been practicing for a while, use the 7-day experiment as a reboot. If you're new, use it as a grounding primer and commit to repeating the cycle for 4 weeks. Track small metrics, gather data. Stay curious. If you want a ready-made resource to guide you through the 7-day experiment with detailed practice scripts, journaling prompts, and a simple group coherence plan, you can download the guided protocol linked below. It includes a printable sheet for the daily micro-practices, suggested phrases for present tense embodiment, and a short template for safe group practice. That resource is designed to support steady, humane experimentation, not to promise instant transformation. Remember, this is a translation. The phrase in the title, "The formula Seth says will create the life you truly want," names a metaphysical claim framed by Jane Roberts' channeled work. What we have done here is operationalize that claim into steps you can practice, informed by contemporary knowledge about attention, heart-brain interaction, and neuroplasticity. Use the metaphors that move you and the measures that make sense to your life. Be rigorous with experiment and gentle with yourself in failure. One final invitation. If this work resonates, try tonight's short micro-practice again, a 5 to 10 minute seated coherent session followed by one micro-action tomorrow. Notice what changes in your felt tone, your micro-behaviors, and the small scaffolding of your day.
Share what shifts with someone you trust, or in a comment if you're doing this alongside others. If you want the guided 7-day protocol and the printable experiment kit, you'll find the link in the description. Use it as a tool to keep yourself honest, curious, and compassionate. Walk through the doorway opened by that question. Hold the image of the life you want and the feeling that belongs to it. Practice until your body knows the future as familiar. The world will catch up in its own time.